All right, and we're live. Yay! All right, hi, and welcome to this event for Shoot the Moonlight Out with William Boyle and Adam Segura. I'm Carter. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the event coordinator here at Astoria Bookshop hosting this event. If you don't know who we are, because you found us through maybe the magic of the internet, we are a bookshop in Astoria, Queens. Before we get started, I want to go through just a few housekeeping things. You will have the opportunity to ask questions during the last 10 minutes of this. If you have questions throughout, you can put them in the Ask a Question function right down there at the bottom. You can also chat with one another over on the right, over there in the chat box. But we will kick you out if you participate in any trolling or any racial, ethnic, or homophobic slurs. Basically, we ask you to be nice and respectful towards one another. Finally, there is a button right down there at the bottom that offers the option to buy a copy of Shoot the Moonlight Out. And I highly recommend buying this book. Perfect as we head into the holiday season for anyone in your family who might like this novel. So let's get things started, and I'll introduce you to these two fantastic authors. Get there. William Boyle, who uses he, him pronouns, is from Brooklyn, New York. His novels include Grave's End, which was nominated for the Grand Prix of de Literature Policière in France, The Lonely Witness, which was nominated for the Hammett Prize, and the Grand Prix of de Literature, I don't speak French, I'm very sorry, Literature Policière. A Friend is a Gift. You give yourself an Amazon Best Book of the Year, and most recently, City of Margins, a Washington Post Best Thriller and Mystery Book of 2020. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi. Alex Segura, who uses he, him pronouns, is the SVP Sales and Marketing at Oni Press and the author of Star Wars Poe Dameron, Free Fall, and the acclaimed Pete Fernandez mystery series. He has also written a number of comic books, most notably the superhero noir The Black Ghost, the YA music series The Archies, and the Archie Meets collection of crossovers. A Miami native, he lives in New York City with his wife and children. So welcome to both of you. Yay.
Thanks for having us.
And
thank you.
now I'm going to have Alex take things over.
Thanks, Carter. Thanks to Astoria Bookshop for hosting this.
Yeah, this is great. I'm so happy you asked me to MC this event because I love the book. And
thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
It's fun to just be able to hang out because we haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah.
But for the uninitiated, how would you describe Shoot the Moonlight Out?
Man, you think I'd be getting good at it at this point, but I'm really not.
I'm sure it'll be good.
It's just it's a kind of a sprawling ensemble crime novel set in southern Brooklyn, and it begins in 1996, but the bulk of the action takes place in June 2001. Just a bunch of lives, mostly a mix of kind of defeated middle-aged people and younger adults who are who are trapped kind of, or trying to escape their lives just crashing together in pre 9/11 New York City. I guess that would be my quick description of it.
It's good. It's good. You summed it up pretty well. I mean, there's so many great characters in the book. But first off, how are you doing, like, with the world?
Oh man, it's probably about the same as everybody. We're hanging in there. It's been a weird year and a half or whatever it's been now, 20 months. But yeah, I mean, there was that window there in the summer where things felt good for a second, and then I'm from New York, but I live in Oxford, Mississippi, and we came back down after a long month or so in New York. In June and July, things got real bad here again, so it was kind of this really terrible return to the way things were in the beginning. Even though we were vaccinated, it was just kind of still just really weird and awful feeling, and there was this really bad wave of even breakthrough cases and all sorts of stuff going on. So, after that, things got a little better. So,
it definitely seems like we're back on some kind of track. I mean, things were pretty dark here in Queens and in New York, obviously. I don't know all over, but you know, it was really. Anyway, how did you manage to write a book during this time? Is you know, I've been there too. It's hard, especially with kids.
I don't know. I think definitely. And this was kind of this book I wrote kind of during the worst of it, kind of in that middle phase where it just seemed like it had gone on forever and it was never going to end, and we didn't know what was happening, and no end was in sight. So this was kind of, you know, to me, it was the thing that was definitely getting me up every day and keeping me sort of sane to have this to work on. And to, you know, usually I would wake up, schedules kind of went out the window because we were just all home all the time. And so my kids would sleep fairly late, and I would wake up at 5 and write for, you know, 4 hours. And that was pretty much, you know, when I got it done. And I mean, I would work on it a little bit more throughout the day too, but that was the bulk of the writing. And you know, it was actually, I mean, as hard of a time it suited my lifestyle pretty well, because I was pretty much just, you know, writing, reading, watching movies, listening to music, and going for walks and hanging out with my family, which is kind of all the stuff I like to do.
Yeah, all the best things. So do you want to talk a little bit about the title of the book and where it comes from? I find, you know, we'll get into music and movies in a little bit, but you got an interesting nod on Twitter about it.
Yeah. So the title comes from a song I love by an artist named Garland Jeffries. You know, he's been around for quite some time. I think probably his kind of, you know, he's been releasing records since the 70s. Probably the ones people might know the best are those 70s records, but there's great records throughout his career. You know, still releasing really great records. And so this is a song, "Shoot the Moonlight Out" is a song off his record "American Boy and Girl." I can't remember how I first. I didn't just kind of. He wasn't.
It's a great title.
It is. Yeah. I mean, that was where it started for me. I was just like, I want to write a book with that title. So I just kind of inspired me to sit down and start writing something. And you know, he was somebody I've liked for a while. It took me a little while to discover him. He wasn't somebody I've known. You know, I haven't known his music for my whole life. I discovered him just kind of through probably because I like Lou Reed so much. I think I saw Lou Reed mention him in an interview somewhere along the line, and picked up his record Ghostwriter and just kind of fell in love with it. And so I mean, the book started there for me. You know, there was something about, I love the song obviously, but just the title just evoked something in me and made me sit down and start working. I just, you know, I like starting with a title. You know, I think that just kind of, it's much harder to do the opposite, just write a whole book and then try to figure out the title. But if you know the title, you know, you kind of have a tone and atmosphere set up from the beginning in some ways.
For sure. And I just want to remind everyone that's tuning in, A, thanks for coming, and B, you can pick up a copy of Bill's book by just clicking that gigantic green button under my face. And it'll take you right to the store page. You can order it from the Astoria Bookshop. And we're going to hit the Q&A period towards the end of our discussion. So if you have a burning question, just click on that Ask a Question button and type it up, and I'll read it over, and we can grill Bill. Really get to the core of this. But, you know, we're both big music fans, and for me, though, I can't listen to music while I write. I don't know if you're different, but I'm always tinkering with playlists, especially now Spotify makes it so easy. But, before I was a big mix CD person. Like that was, you know, I couldn't, even though I was an adult, I couldn't express my feelings. But if I gave you a mix CD, that's kind of what I was feeling. Yeah. But how does music play a part in your process?
I was the same way, definitely. Mix tapes were, I mean, I would spend so much time making mixtapes.
There's an art to it.
I mean, there is mixed CDs. I made a lot of mixed CDs too, but there wasn't quite the art to that. Mixtapes though was like a all night thing. Like you had to get you had to work the controls. You had to, you know.
Yeah, it's like a science experiment. Yeah,
you had to get the transitions right.
I'd always have like sorry to interrupt you. I'd always have one or two songs that were like 20 seconds long, like those little, like you could just drop them in if you had a little bit more tape left. But
you had to think about that runtime, and you had to think about like what songs will fit in this last little bit of tape. You didn't want to leave too much blank tape at the end of a side. Yeah, I missed that. I liked making mixed CDs too, but that was always just kind of click and drag and whatever.
Yeah, I feel like 80 minutes is also a long time to commit. Like now with Spotify, you could be like, here's 18 hours of my favorite music. And it's like, like.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing. It's, I miss making mixtapes. It's just, it was really one of my favorite things to do.
Well, we were probably both like single men with no responsibilities. So.
Yeah, I spent a lot of lonely hours just making mixtapes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, music for me it's I think usually I'm listening to music all the time, so I'm kind of trying to absorb certain things. Like going into a book, I think I'm trying to often carry the tone or feeling of a certain record or certain song into it. Like Garland Jeffries is a big one for me. Lou Reed's New York, Jim Carroll Band, Catholic Boy, a lot of Springsteen. I know we both love, like Sharon Van Etten, like she's always kind of, Nico Case, I mean, there's just Tom Waits, Bob Dylan, all the stuff I love kind of, I think, inspires me to want to sit down and work. But when I'm actually working, I usually can only listen to instrumental stuff.
Yeah, same.
So, I listen to a lot of like Nick Cave and Warren Ellis soundtrack stuff, John Fahey, guitar, instrumental guitar music, classical music, jazz, really, it usually depends on the book somewhat. Like when I was writing A Friend Is a Gift You Give Yourself, I was really listening to a lot of like, John Carpenter soundtracks. It just felt like it fit what I was doing.
Which is funny because you would think that's one of your lighter novels.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm talking about, it was like all of his soundtrack stuff. So I'm talking about not only like Halloween and and the horror stuff, but some of the, like Big Trouble in Little China,
that makes sense.
All of it. And for this book, what was I listening to? I was listening to a lot of the usual stuff. I listened to, there's this band, which is really just one woman, called Noveler that I really like.
Oh, nice.
And her name's Sarah Lipstate. She instrumental guitar music and kind of soundscapes. I was listening to that a lot during the writing of this book. Listening to her last record, so a lot of that sort of stuff.
I just wanted to follow her on Spotify.
Yeah.
No, I mean, our tastes are pretty simpatico. I mean, you did that. Now we're really kind of falling into the rabbit hole of music talk, but that's fine. I mean, that Springsteen conversion therapy, like I didn't need to be converted. Bill did this playlist called Springsteen Conversion Therapy and he shared it. But it's the link I sent to people when they're like on the fence about The Boss, which is, you shouldn't be on the fence about it, but
no, I was for a guy who I was working real hard on. Like I kind of, he wasn't
not getting it.
It wasn't just, nothing was connecting with him. Like this, usually something gets through for people, like whether it's Nebraska or like just something clicks with people who think they don't like Springsteen and they're at least ready to acknowledge that, okay, I had him wrong and I'll give him another shot. But this guy just wasn't happening. I still
did it work? Did you convert?
I don't think so. No, I think it was a failure. But that's a good playlist. It
is a good playlist. Yeah. You have so many great characters in this book. I'd love to hear a little bit about, I mean, you don't have to run down each one, but the ones that really resonated with you as you kind of change POV, and it's one of these great, I was casting the book in my head, just that's how I read, but I wonder if you do that too, and if you could talk a little bit about the different characters and how they play off each other.
Yeah, definitely. I just, I do tend to cast things in my head a little bit. I don't know that I did it so much with this one because one of my problems with, younger characters is I don't tend to cast them because I can never think of like the
right actor.
Like actors in their teens and 20s. I don't really know them unless somebody jumps out at me and I'm like, oh, that person is perfect. I tend to think more about older actors and actresses, and so I don't know that I had really anybody. I have definitely in the past had people in mind. In this book, I didn't really have anybody, but the main characters are there's this guy Jack Carnaccia, who's a kind of a vigilante, local, kind of doles out neighborhood justice a little bit. He's a good guy, and kind of falls into doing that just to help people. And he's a widow, and he's in his 40s, and he loses his daughter, and it's kind of just when we see him in the main action of the main part of the book, he is just kind of defeated and alone. And then there's Lily Murphy, who is just out of college and went to college in Pennsylvania and has returned home to her southern Brooklyn neighborhood to live with her mom. She's like wants to be a writer basically, and winds up teaching a kind of community writing class in the basement of the local church. Her stepbrother is this kid Bobby Santa, or her former stepbrother is this kid Bobby Santavasco, who is kind of the troubled kid whose bad decision sparks the main action in the book. And he's a, can't remember, 12 or 13 when we first meet him, and then a little older, 18 or so, 19 maybe, when we see him next, and for the remainder of the book. Kind of a self-destructive kid whose involvement in this accident at the beginning of the book is just kind of sets him on a path. And then there is Charlie French, who's kind of the villain, the bad guy, who's kind of a low-level thug. And then there's Francesca Clark, who's about Bobby's age, and wants to be she's just graduated high school. She wants to be a filmmaker, and she lives with her mom and her grandmother. She really likes her mom, and she really hates her grandmother. And her father, who was an artist, passed away a few years before. So there's a lot of kind of loss that is threaded through all of the lives of all of the characters, and they're all
it seems to like really connect them all.
Yeah, and they all are connected in some way, and or cross paths in some way at some point in the book.
I mean, this isn't unique to just Shoot the Moonlight Out, but setting is so strong and so integral to all your books, and Brooklyn obviously is front and center in most of them. And I just, you don't live in Brooklyn anymore, but you were born and raised there, and I want to talk a little bit about the range of story that's possible in Brooklyn and why you kind of keep coming back to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a while since I lived there full time. I'm back all the time. And I spent kind of the most formative time of my life there. And even when I wasn't living there at first, I was not far away. I was either, 90 miles away in the Hudson Valley, or I was in the Bronx, or I was, within, an hour and a half of home until I moved down south. But when I sit down to write, it's just the place I automatically kind of go to. I mean, I think I could probably just spend the rest of my life writing about my block if I wanted to. I mean, just it's a kind of a wellspring of creativity for me, and I think it's also a blend. What I do, I think, is a blend of the real Brooklyn I knew and some mythological version of Brooklyn, and also just a Brooklyn of my imagination. So it's kind of just shooting off in all these different directions now, and there are characters I think that I want to return to that have kind of appeared for little stretches in books. And I also like now, these last two books I've kind of dug back into the past a little bit.
It's like the Bill Boyle expanded universe.
Yeah, not the past, but I've gone back to the 90s and the early 2000s now, and I just I like being there. I like writing about, it's the time that I know it best, so it's easier. It's what I imagine when I go there in my mind. But it's also just kind of the time I'm most interested in a lot of ways, just because it was just a formative era for me.
Yeah, I love that you said it. You've said it in two different time periods, but the bulk of the book happens in June 2001, which is it feels like another world. It's before 9/11. Obviously, it's before all the stuff that's happening lately. But what was the logic behind that? Was that you know, it gives a book, I don't want to say a sense of dread, but, you know, as a reader, you know what's coming, and you know, like the seismic change that New York's going to go through. And then you're kind of feeling it for these characters in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just kind of always think about that month in particular as the end of an era, sort of, you know, and especially, I mean, in many ways, to me, it feels like I was, you know, whatever, 22 going on 23. So it's this formative time for me already, this transitional time for me personally. And then it also feels kind of like the end of the 90s. You know, even if we stretch the 90s out, call them the long 90s a little bit. It feels like to me in my mind, like that's kind of where the 90s, you know, aesthetically and otherwise ends. And then it's far enough away. June 2001 is far enough away from what's to come in September that it still feels like the past, and it's not right up against that immediate, you know, that immediate thing that's happening then. So I don't know, it just sticks out in my memory as this kind of this moment where, you know, we didn't know things were going to change, and we didn't know it was the end of something, but it was. Yeah,
and you can only really look back on it through the prism of 9/11, which is interesting. You know, I know you're a big film guy, and you love. I mean, I think that's a very generic thing, but you're a student of film. You know, you're. I think that's a better way to put it. You know, visually, how do you kind of see a book in your mind's eye? I mean, is it something where you almost kind of see it through the lens of a certain director, or like cinematically? Like, how does a book show up in your head?
Oh, and that's a great question. I think so. I mean, I imagine it. You know,
I ask this because sometimes I write a book and I think this is a Brian De Palma movie. Like, this is how I'm seeing it. Like, Miami Midnight felt very. I mean, I saw it through that filter, and I don't know if you do that or if I'm crazy or.
No, I absolutely do that, and I think, I mean, to a certain extent, I think, how could anybody who, at least people who like films, how could you not see in that way?
Yeah.
And so I've kind of always seen in that way. I think sometimes more specifically than others, definitely like The Lonely Witness, I was feeling like more like, you know, the De Palma thing, and Friend is a Gift You Give Yourself. I was feeling a little bit of like Jonathan Demme, you know, Something Wild, Married to the Mob feel. This book, and a lot of my books, I think, you know, I'm always kind of feel like I'm always influenced structurally and you know, the way it looks in my mind by Robert Altman and Alan Rudolph are, you know, huge.
Yeah, I definitely got an Altman vibe from it.
That's kind of, you know, I mean, that, I think, you know, certainly like from the very beginning, you know, I've loved Robert Altman movies for a long time. And I think even from once I tapped into that as kind of like an inspiration, I kind of never looked back. And Alan Rudolph was his, you know, Altman's protege, so he's kind of similar in a lot of ways, but he's even a little bit more, I think Alan Rudolph can be a little bit more stylized. And so sometimes I like that quality. I like thinking about, you know, these things in kind of stylized terms, but I definitely see, like, you know, I don't write these things as scripts at all. I don't really write scripts. I don't really, you know, I've not done a ton of that. But I do see shots in my head. I think I do see it like a film a little bit in my head. Not all the time, but certainly some of the time.
Yeah, I try to think visually too, just because I'm in the comic space, and, you know, like a lot of that is like you kind of meet the artist in the middle, and then they take your idea and visualize it. But I think that's also something you do with the reader, or at least I think we do. Like, we kind of put the pieces there and describe them just enough that the reader can create their own movie in their mind. Not to get too simplistic about it, but
no, yeah, and I mean, when you're doing, I mean, when you're, and I like to, you know, I love to write details, you know, sensory details, and, you know, those are close-ups, you know, I mean, just those are things that bring that just bring another level to the work. I think, like James Gray said, he's always looking for what detail he can bring to a scene to make it sing with life. And so I'm kind of always thinking about that, and that's kind of I think that's definitely connected to seeing the story like that.
Sorry, I think my daughter's screaming. She's fine.
I'm sure one of my kids will start.
Yeah, some screaming going on, but it'll be fine. I think when I plug the book event, or when I plug the book coming out, I mentioned that you're a writer's writer, and I meant that as a, obviously as a compliment. But the way, what I meant to say is that sometimes there's a handful of writers that always tend to come up in conversation between other writers, and you're one of them, where everyone's like, oh, his new book is so good, or like, Bill's stuff is so great.
Thanks,
it's almost like musicians when they're like, I imagine like in the 60s when like Keith Richards and George Harrison are talking shop, they're like, oh, have you heard this album? It's like the people that are in the trenches, like, and know how to do it, like always mention your books. And I'd like to flip it a little bit and just kind of see, what have you been, obviously, I think we've talked about like who your inspirations are. Like, I think we overlap a lot, like Lahane and names like that, and Megan Abbott. But I'd love to hear about, stuff that you've been reading lately that's gotten you jazzed, especially during this challenging time. Like, it's been hard to focus for me.
It has, yeah. I mean, I had actually probably during the pandemic, I had one of my worst reading stretches that I've ever had. I really dug deep with movies and kind of, I've always kind of used movies as a security thing, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think during kind of the worst stretch of it, I was like watching as many movies a day as I could. That was a way of coping, I guess. Not to belittle movies as an art form. I was just it was all I could do at the moment.
It's easier. It's just a little more passive.
Yeah. But I've had a good run this year. I mean, I read, Willie Vlotten's one of my favorite writers. I read his new book, The Night Always Comes, which, I think I read that about 3 times.
Wow.
Because I read it once, and then I was doing an interview with him, so I read it again, and then I just read it again because I wanted to. And that actually, I read it first while I was working on this book, so I think and hope a little bit of the spirit of that book kind of rubbed off on me. He's always one of my favorites.
Do you try and avoid reading like in the genre when you're writing?
There are certain writers I have to avoid.
Yeah, I can't read like Elroy if I'm writing, because I know.
I can't read like Richard Price and Elroy are big ones for me. Like, because all of a sudden, and even Cormac McCarthy, like you just start to, their style
talk like them,
their style seeps into, and it's just all of a sudden I lose my voice in it a little bit. But there's, I think it usually is helpful for me to read a little bit outside of the genre, or read kind of different stuff and pull in influences from a wide range of places. What else have I been reading? I loved Megan's book, obviously.
Oh yeah, it was so good. I thought it was definitely. She just keeps getting better, which I don't understand. It's just like,
she's amazing.
Yeah.
Your new book I love.
Oh, thanks.
I read that. Secret Identity, March.
Thank you.
22.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
I loved Allison Galen's new book.
You guys shared a release date. That was cool.
Yeah, and we're doing an event together next week for Book People.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a great store.
I'm reading right now. I'm kind of totally consumed by Paul Auster's Stephen Crane biography.
I'm tempted to dive into that. I mean, the New York trilogy for me is like a seminal book. Even though it's like three novellas, but the way they weave together. I'm curious about that.
It's really good. I mean, Crane was big for me early on. So I've always liked Crane, and I've always liked Paul Auster too. So I've kind of strayed from him a little over the last like 10 or 15 years. But when I saw this was coming out, I was just so excited. And it's a massive 700-page act of like just literary obsession, which is really cool. I mean, I've been kind of all over the place, I guess, I guess in the summer, I read a trilogy of novels that I'd heard of, but I'd never read. The writer is Agatha Christoph, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing her first name right. Agota. It's spelled Agota. Christoph, Hungarian writer, and she wrote this trilogy of novels called The Notebook. Not that notebook, but The Notebook.
A Notebook.
What is it? The Notebook, The Proof, and The Third Lie. It's a trilogy all in one book, and it just blew me. It just totally blew me away. It's one of the best things I've ever read. So That's
Nice.
That's a lot of the stuff I've loved recently.
Yeah,
How
that's
about you?
amazing. Yeah, what have I been reading? I read Like a Sister, which is Kelly Garrett's new book.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really sharp domestic suspense book, and it's kind of, for her first two novels are cozy, humorous, and this one is still funny. She's got her voice in there, but it's also a little bit more intense and grittier. And I don't know if you read Razorblade Tears, the Sean Cosby book.
Yeah. I was going to mention that one too. I love.
Yeah,
Sean.
he's just. I know. I always feel, but not bad. I mean, I feel everyone's heaped so much praise on it, but it delivers. It holds up.
Oh,
and
so great. Yeah.
I liked Allison's book a lot too, and Megan's book, and Laura Lippman's book Dream Girl was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I got that one. I haven't read it yet though.
I think you'll dig it. Yeah, it's kind of a riff on misery, but it feels very modern. And I have this giant pile over here of books that I've been reading. I really got into this guy Paul Vittich, who writes spy novels.
Oh yeah.
Just because during the pandemic, I read most of the Le Carré, like the Tinker Tailor series, and got really into those. And then Paul Vittich is probably the closest to that vibe, that very gray, messy spycraft story with complicated characters. And so he wrote one set in Cuba, which was interesting to me, called The Good Assassin. And then I read his new one, The Mercenary and the Matchmaker, which is coming out next year.
Nice.
And lots of comics and stuff like that. But in Kismet, which is by Amina Akhtar, and it's coming out from Thomas and Mercer next year, is really good. And it's about the wellness industry.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I'll check that out.
I love how we both say, "Oh, well, we haven't been reading that much," and then we just rattle off like 20 books. But one thing I wanted to talk about is your process, because you're very prolific. I think you have about a book a year, a book every year and a half, and I think for me the craft has to be a blend of craft and work, and also obsession. Like, I can't write about something if I'm not into it. That's the obsession has to kind of work for me, and I have to be really. It's never research. It's just whatever I'm kind of keying in on. And I wonder what's your process like? Is it something like you said, a title comes into your head and you just kind of build the story around it, or is it whatever is like percolating in your brain and you put that into a book? And
yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think I tend to have kind of either a few ideas just on the back burner, or just some images or some lines that have haunted me, or even titles that have haunted me that I've wanted to use. This book kind of started, I said the title, and that's true, that did start with the title, but I also, when I sat down to start to write it, I started with this scene where Bobby and this other character, Zeke, are throwing rocks at cars getting off the Belt Parkway. And that was just a thing I'd wanted to start something with for a long time. So
it's a great scene.
I had this title and I just started writing that scene. And once I did that, other stuff started to fall into place, and I started to see the world of the story. But yeah, definitely, I gotta have some enthusiasm for, and just be kind of haunted by or obsessed with whatever I'm writing about. And I've been, it's been a book a year, so I try to just keep my head down and do the work. But I also have, like, a writer I love, who I didn't mention when I was naming great books I read this year, is Ace Atkins, who's got his new book's great too.
Just one of the best guys in the whole thing.
Just the best. And I mean, just a model for me in every way. And seeing his work ethic, his living, we're good friends, and I live a couple of minutes up the road from him, and he's been writing 2 books a year for a while now. And just to see that, that's something I've always admired, like that, the writers I really like, Goodis and Williford and Thompson and and Himes, like the way they cranked out books, but they were all high quality. Like, that's always just an aesthetic that I've admired and yearned for. So. Yeah,
it's really impressive. And it's hard. I mean, I didn't have a book. Well, I did have a book last year. Yeah, no, I didn't have a book last year, but it's because I was working on this. But I think we're at the same rhythm, where it's about a year and a half. Yeah, but Ace's productivity is insane. It's just like, I don't know how he does that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I just want to remind everyone you can push that giant green button below us to pick up a copy of Bill's great novel, Shoot the Moonlight Out. And we've got a couple questions queued up, but we will have time for a few more. So if you have a question for Bill or for us, drop it in that Ask a Question chat and we will get to it. Trying to think, I want to talk a little bit more about music because I want to kind of get your, I guess, your origin story. Like, what were you always a fan? Was it something that kind of came to you in high school or college? And like, did you play music as a kid? Were you in bands or anything like that?
No, I got into, probably like as a kid, I was, I'm 43, so I was really really into like hair metal.
Oh, wow.
when I was little. When I was little, it was like, Appetite for Destruction and Def Leppard and
oh, wow.
Skid Row and all
it's so
that.
funny because we're only a few years apart, but I totally missed that. I was like tapped in with like Nevermind, and that was my door.
Well, that was the album that changed. I'm talking about I was into hair metal like as a
kid. Yeah.
Kid, and then when Nevermind came out, that was kind of the beginning of the shift. And I really got into a lot of that stuff. Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam. I liked all that stuff. Smashing Pumpkins, even. In high school, I really got into Tori Amos. I loved Tori Amos.
She just came out with a new one.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't listened to anything of hers in a while, but those first 4 records were huge for me. And I also kind of simultaneously started discovering just the stuff that would really shape me, like the Velvet Underground. Sonic Youth, and just all that stuff kind of started popping up for me in high school. Guided by Voices, all that stuff started opening up things for me, and then by college was when things really kind of exploded open, I think, even more, and I started discovering Tom Waits and the Pogues, and really got into Springsteen and got into Warren Zevon, and all that kind of whole 90s like alt country. I don't like that term, but whatever. All that stuff,
like Wilco and Uncle Tupelo, and
and then that all led to Nico Case, and it was just kind of a snowball of
she's so good. She's amazing.
Yeah, she is the best. So yeah, I never really played anything. I kind of tried in college. I lived with a bunch of musicians, and we called ourselves a band, but and they were all talented musicians, but I was just like, I was
surround.
I was just basically trying to like be Tom Waits or something and not doing a good job. So I wrote. I could also never do the same thing twice. We made like we probably recorded thousands and thousands of songs, and I never would have been able to play the same song twice. So
I was a fairly competent rhythm guitarist and vocalist for a while. Yeah, but it's once I got in, I couldn't do any solos. I just didn't do them, and I couldn't really the only way I could play and sing is if I was strumming. Just because I'm left-handed, but I was playing right-handed, so it was like a whole. I didn't have the skill of like a Paul McCartney where you could just flip the hand, flip the instrument and be okay.
No, I think I've always kind of wished I could be that or do that. Somebody asked me at some point, this was years ago, somebody asked me if I ever got jealous of other writers. And I was like, I don't ever get jealous of other writers. I get jealous of musicians. I wish I could do that. I wish I could, write songs that, and just make albums like the ones that I love, but
can't do it all.
Yeah, not in the cards.
Do you want to? Did I miss anything about the book that you wanted to touch on, or?
No, I think that's good.
Can you say what you're working on next, or? I'm one thing I was going to mention. The reason I asked about the music stuff is I've got this like music murder mystery. That's probably not the next book, but the book after next. That I'll have to pick your brain about it because I think you'll dig it when we get there.
Yeah, that sounds good. And music does play. Music. I think. I will say this about the book. I think it does hang over the book in some way, other than just the Garland Jeffries song. You know,
Mhm.
there's a Dion song playing at a key time early in the book, and I love Dion.
Yeah, he's great.
You know, and that's kind of this. You know, as much as Lou Reed is the sound of New York to me, or as much as Sonic Youth or Cannibal Ox or you know, whoever else, the sound of New York to me, Dion is definitely, or Garland Jeffries. Dion's the sound of New York to me.
Oh yeah.
And then there's like, you know, Amelia, Jack's daughter, who dies, has a you know, Cranberries poster on her wall. So I think there's kind of
Mhm.
this book has some ghosts kind of in it, and Dolores O'Riordan is one. You know, I
Yeah.
think she passed away not long before I started working on this, and I love the
So
Cranberries.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's definitely, I think it's always kind of in the background, if not the foreground of
Mhm.
you know, stuff that I'm thinking about and working on. But as for what I'm working on next, I'm kind of, you know, now that I've been doing things again, it's been a busy few months. I've kind of gotten off track on this new book
Mhm.
I'm working on. But if I could just sit down and get an uninterrupted stretch of time, I'm kind of getting close to the home stretch of it. But it's a little bit different. I'm not good about, and kind of superstitious about talking about works
Yeah.
in
No worries.
progress.
No worries.
But
I get it.
no, but it's set in the late 70s in New York, and it's kind of weirdly kind of like a dark New York fairy tale or folk tale a little bit.
Oh, nice.
So I don't know if that sounds right yet, but I'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that piques my interest.
I'll see if that sticks.
Well, let's get to these questions and see what the attendees have to ask us.
Yeah.
So Allie asks, how much research did you have to do for this book?
I hate research.
Yeah, same. I'll do it if
I
I'm
know.
obsessed with it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess, what people think about when they think about research. I mean, I think I'm always researching things. Like I will go down rabbit holes where I'm looking at, you know, for instance, like what would that poster have looked like that was hanging over Amelia's bed?
Right.
And, you know, she's also got a River Phoenix poster hanging over her bed. And I was like, you know, that's the kind of research I like thinking
Mhm.
about what those specific, trying to get those specific details right. I don't like research in the sense
Homework
that,
sense.
like, yeah, in the homework sense, where I'm not like, you know, one of the nice things about writing about characters who aren't experts on things is you don't have to be an expert. You could just kind of give them your own dumbness on,
Yeah,
on
exactly.
certain things. So I don't worry about that stuff too much. You know, if I'm going to get something wrong, I make sure I pin it on the character.
Yeah, it's a good way to dodge a bullet.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I did a ton of research for this on that level. I mean, I think, you know, I knew the world of the story. I knew the time. I knew that, you know, I was writing about the place as it was when I was living there.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. There's, you know, maybe a little bit of backstory stuff that I just kind of looked into and dug around in some news archives for, but nothing too heavy duty. I mean, for me, the fun is imagination and
The
making
journey.
stuff up. Yeah.
A few more questions. Casey asks, did you ever edit anything, a scene, character, whatever, out of the book that you wish you could have kept in retrospect?
It's a good question. I was close to editing out a scene that I really liked, but I kept it in. There was some stuff. There was I don't want to say too much about this
Yeah.
just because it was the end. But there was, I wrote kind of, if this was coming out on Blu-ray or DVD, I could say I could put my alternate endings in.
Yeah.
But I wrote this was like, you know, not Farewell to Arms territory or anything, but I wrote several different endings for the book, and a couple of them I liked, but ultimately I wound up being happiest with it as it is. So there was some stuff in those sections though that I was kind of sorry to lose.
Mhm.
It was kind of a long stretch. In one of the endings, there was a whole long encounter and a whole kind of subplot that I just had to axe out of the story. It actually involved ghosts.
Oh, nice. Well, you'll find a home for it. I'm always amazed at how we find ways to use stuff that makes the cutting room floor.
No, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's something I've been doing recently, because I also wrote the very beginning of the pandemic. I kind of, in a like some manic fit, wrote a really horrible draft of a first novel that'll probably never be published.
Oh, nice.
But I think I'll probably use it for scraps.
Yeah. No, I did that too. I went through this big Stephen King phase when my son was born, and I think part of it is just you want to be more scared than the scariness you're feeling like in real life. Like, I think parenthood is terrifying, like even if in the best circumstances. But I wrote about 100 pages of a very, like, small town, bad things start to happen, like very Stephen King. But then I ended up pulling some of the stuff and retweaking it for other stuff. And, that's, writers are always using what's around, like my point is that there's never a wasted word, You there?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
Agree.
Allie had another question, and I think this is the last one. Or no, there's more. Yeah, there's two more. Allie asks, you mentioned this a little bit, Bill, already, but what projects do you each have coming up? So I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to talk about, or.
No, I'm trying to think. I'm working on this new book, and that's kind of the main thing I've got going on. Once I can sit down and do it, I got a couple of short stories that I don't tend to publish a ton of. I say I never publish short stories, and I've got like 3 short stories coming out in the next few months. So I have a story that just came out in Ellery Queen called Junjun Ling and the Sad Case of Sonny LaGrassa, and then I have a story coming out in this next issue of the Southwest Review called Getting Mercied, which is a continuation of a novella I wrote called Everything is Broken. And then I just wrote a short story for a Cornell Woolrich anthology that I don't know when that's going to be out.
I'm the same. I only write short stories when I'm invited. Like I have a vampire mentality. Like if you you ask me to come play, I'll do it. If not, it's not part of my process. No. So
actually, I find short stories to be
super hard,
really harder than novels, harder than novels in most ways.
In terms of what I have coming up, Secret Identity comes out in March. I'm excited about that. It's a comic book murder mystery in the 70s. And there's comic book sequences, actual comic book pages in the novel. So that's fun.
It's great. It's so good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was fun. It was great. It was nice to write my first New York novel. Most of my novels are set in Miami because that's where I'm from. And so this one still has a nice Miami connection, but it's my first New York book. So Penny asks, is there a genre you haven't written in but want to try?
I mean, I like kind of crossing genres within my books, I think. So I'm always kind of, I'm always kind of shifting genres a little bit, and kind of, I think my books are crime novels, but they're also kind of dark comedies, and I think there's also kind of usually an element of melodrama, or I would love to write like a big old-fashioned melodrama. That's like my dream, like a 3-hour weepy, that's
you can do it.
What I want to do. Yeah, that's what I want to do, like a 3-hanky operation.
Oh, that would be great. I'd buy that. I mean, I wrote a sci-fi book in the Poe Dameron Star Wars book, so that was fun. Sometimes, when I feel like one day I'll get my druthers and write a true crime book, but it's also a lot more fun to just make it up. Like,
Yeah, that would stress me out too much.
Yeah.
I can't write nonfiction without lying, so I just would get in trouble, I think.
Yeah, I just feel like I'd screw something up or like get a source wrong, and I'm already anxious as is, so maybe that's just a dream that won't be achieved. But Casey also had one more question. I think this is our last one. How fast do you write drafts for your books?
It depends. I mean, when I'm going good and when I'm able to work every day, and I'm usually trying to get at least 1,000 words a day. So I'll tend to write a draft. I think I wrote a draft of this in about 3.5 months. But that was, I wasn't traveling. I wasn't leaving the house really even that much because of the situation. So it was really an uninterrupted stretch of time, which I've not experienced that much otherwise, but it was really also kind of ideal for the book. I was really just, I didn't get sidetracked. I didn't get thrown off course. I was able to work every morning on it and every day on it. So, you know, then that was the draft, obviously. That was the first draft. So there was still a lot of work to be done after that.
Yeah, I'm in the same wheelhouse. I think if I'm really cranking, I could do like 3 months, and that's like really, like you said, not going anywhere, writing every day, getting a good word count each day. Secret Identity took a little bit longer just because it was actually research intensive, even though it was like stuff I was reading for fun anyway. Like I had to make sure this Comic-Con that's happening, it has to really fit on the calendar, and like this, and that affects the whole timeline. And like, was this person alive when this is happening? And so, yeah, usually it's about 3 or 4 months if I'm really cooking.
Yeah.
But Bill, this was a lot of fun. I love this book. I'm a big fan.
Thanks.
One of my favorite people in this crazy thing.
Thanks. So good seeing you. Glad we got to hang out and talk. And
yeah, man. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else you want to say about the book?
I don't think so. I think that was great, man. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And
of course, don't forget to buy the book.
Yeah, thanks so much to Astoria Bookshop for hosting this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you both for joining us, and thank you for hosting this conversation. It was fantastic and really interesting. Definitely buy that book right down there. You can see it. That big giant button.
It's a great book.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes,
and buy Secret Identity when it comes out in March.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
that's a great one.
Oh, thank
you. You can pre-order it, and I highly recommend pre-ordering books right now because of the supply chain issues. So absolutely pre-order Alex's book.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching. We have a couple more events coming up. This month, we have a YA event in 2 weeks-ish, a week and a half. It's not this next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that with a local author named Katie Heaney. And then after that, we kind of wrap up for the fall and head into the holiday season. So if you live in Astoria, be sure to stop in for Small Business Saturday because we will be donating 10% of the profits that we make on that day to the Astoria Food Pantry. So that's really exciting. Anyway, thank you all so much, and have a great night.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Hugs to everybody, Bill. Take care.